Hi, welcome back to our channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today I'm going to talk about the so-called counteroffensive and of Ukraine, and the question is, what counteroffensive? Because everybody is talking about this, but I do not see any major conflict or any major action. Yes, there are skirmishes. Yes, there are a lot of people killed and injured, equipment destroyed, but there's no real sign of any counteroffensive. So one has to ask yourself on what did really happen? Well, at the end of the day, you have two opposing forces in Ukraine. You have the Ukrainian side, and then you have the Russian side. Now, according to Western narratives, the Russians have invaded Ukraine and conquered a number of oblasts, and now they have integrated these oblasts into their own territory of Russia Federation, but the Ukrainians believe that it's still Ukrainian territory. Now, I've talked about in my previous videos that there was an analysis done in 1993 on how Ukraine can ever defend itself against an aggressive Russia. And the conclusion in the report, and I have it made a lot of logic, was that they cannot win a war with Russia. Because at the end of the day, numbers are numbers. 1 + 1 is 2. If you got, say, 40 million people and the Russians have 120 million people, then surely that's David against Goliath. And the industries are bigger and so on and so forth. And the one can produce more armor than the other one. David versus Goliath. So it's impossible to really win. So what the suggestion was is that the Ukrainians would set up a defensive line and force the Russians to attack. And as we all know, if you attack a certain positions, then your losses are usually higher than the defending defending forces. And losses means political loss of political power or support, unfriendly or getting, not unfriendly, unhappy population. You lose a lot of men and equipment, and that has an input on your production capability and economy, because at the end of the day, war is destructive. You don't build anything with war, you destroy things. And if you destroy things, then you destroy assets. And assets cost money. So the idea was that Ukraine will set up certain defensive lines and then defend defensive lines and try to inflict as much damage onto the attacking Russians until the Russians will decide the price that they are paying is too high and they will withdraw. But for some other reason, the Ukrainians precisely did the opposite. It was the Russians that went into defensive positions, and the Ukrainians decided that they have to attack the Russian positions and thereby retrieving the lost oblasts and the lost ground or areas to the Russians. And thereby they were losing the battle. Because at the end of the day, the Russians in terms of technology was far superior, and in terms of quantities far exceeded the capabilities of the defensive, the attacking Ukrainians. So again, it's David against Goliath, and then everybody thinks that David is going to win. This is not a fantasy world, as I said in my previous video. This is reality. David and Goliath is a story in the Bible. It's not, fixed in reality. So there was no chance that Ukraine can ever win Russia. Now the only way they can do it is by getting the Western worlds involved. But that means the industrial base of the Western world as well as the manpower, in order to set up a proper attacking force onto the Russian forces in order to become Goliath as big as Goliath 1 versus Goliath 2, or even bigger. Call it the Titans. In any case, so that is what required, but that is never what happened. So this is an impossible task to achieve by the Ukrainians. And that's why, contrary to what their capabilities are, and contrary to what the suggested military doctrine should have been, the Ukrainians did the opposite, and then they had lots of losses. Now the question is always why? Well, at the end of the day, they were outgunned in every sense of the word. They had no air superiority. They had very little technological superiority, except for somewhat 2 weapons that were supplied by the West. But the Russians quickly learned and nullified that advantage. And then what? You know, you can look at the map of Ukraine on the border. The border, the front is about 1,200 kilometers long. The Russians have about, well, what do they have? They have 300,000 men in reserve. They had 200,000 men on original SMO, and then they had another 150 on volunteers, and then they had about 80 Donbass militias. So that's about 630,000 men, more or less. More or less. Don't take that absolutely. And how much do the Ukrainians have? Apparently, they started off with 200, according to the Russian Minister of Defense. Then they expanded up to 700,000 men. Then they lost a lot of people. Then they went to 11 call-up exercises, I understand. And now they are considering full-blown mobilization. Is that the right English term for that? Okay, but in any case, so let's say the Ukrainians had 700,000 men. People say they lost about 400,000 men dead. I can't believe that. I don't agree with that. But they lost a lot of men. And say they have now gathered another 200,000 men off the streets. And they lost about 200,000 men, so they're back on 700,000 men. So they are more or less on par with the Russians. But the problem is that they don't have the armament that goes with it. They don't have the experience that goes with it because they lost most of the experienced people. So what did the West do? So the West gave them, how many HIMARS? 20? How many tanks, Leopard tanks did they give them? How many? 30 or so? How many Challenger tanks? I think 12 or 14. How many Leclerc? Also around 12 or 14. Well, they're supposed to become Abrams tanks, but they are not there yet. So the tanks that were supplied, the top grade, the most modern ones, 50 tanks, 54 tanks. And then we have some older tanks like the Leopard 1 and so forth and so on. But I always talk about that the tank is a tank is a tank. And if you can fire a cannon, you can take out another tank. And if you can fire high explosives, then you can take out any defensive position or pillbox or whatever you want to call it. So you can use a tank as an artillery piece, as a mobile artillery piece. And then the West gave them a number of howitzers, self-driven howitzers and so on. But at the end of the day, if you add them all together, it is nothing compared to what the Russians have. The numbers are still skewed. They are still lopsided. Right, and then we come to the narrative that was always pushed down our throats by the pro-Russian people, commentators. Yes, when the SMO started, the Ukrainian army was destroyed. Then they rebuilt the army, the military equipment from the Ukrainians by obtaining all the other weapons from the old Soviet countries. And that built the second Ukrainian army. And then that was all destroyed by the Russians, and then we had all the weapons supplied by the Western nations. And somehow these things are not being destroyed, according to the narratives. Yes, they are just being destroyed, but not on a mass scale that they, oh God, first phase 1, 2, 3. But in any case, so now we had this big push in this summer offensive, and the minister, and it was basically, told to us by pro-Russian commentators that there were about 80,000 Ukrainian highly trained soldiers that were involved, and they were ready to do this counter-offensive actions. And well, at the end of the day, according to the Russian Minister of Defense, 60,000 of them were killed, and I think 6,000 or 9,000 hardware pieces were destroyed, including tanks and artillery pieces, which makes no sense. I thought Ukrainian army was destroyed in the first SMO last year. And then I heard that the second Ukrainian army hardware was also destroyed in November last year. So how can they still have so many hardware pieces and tanks and so on, and that the Russian defense minister can claim that they destroyed more, I think between 7,000 or 9,000 pieces in 2 months or 3 months. And how did they kill yet 80,000 or 60,000 soldiers? No. People, like I said in my previous videos, get back and look at reality. Yes, a lot of people have died. Make no mistake. Yes, a lot of soldiers have been injured. Yes. Hospitals are full. Yes. There are daily people in cemeteries. Yes. But does anybody understand how much is 80,000 men or 60,000 men? I once told you in my previous videos that our primary school has 1,000 kids. So you're talking about 60 primary schools. When I was in the army, we had a battalion, and I think the battalion was, in that stage, our battalion was 1,000 men. And you stand there on the parade ground, and you look around, and you see all these men. That's 1,000 men that you have to kill. That's a lot. That means 60 companies, and it's 60 brigades. Yeah, that's a hell of a lot of number. And then you watch some UAV type of videos. Then the tank is shot, Ukrainian tank, and then you see the drivers and so on are evacuating their vehicle. So they're not killed. So what are we really talking about? Then you have to ask yourself that, did anybody, so the main bulk of the attacks was in the sub-regional area. Now, did anybody ever had a look at the map? So you go into Google Map, and what you see is you see farmlands. Farmlands. That is what you see. Flatland. Very little natural, strategic points or whatever you can say that you can utilize. So whatever you have to do is you have to storm over open ground. You have to travel over open ground. Now with today's modern, how do you call it, CSIR? Intelligence gathering and surveillance, they got abbreviations for that. I don't know the name. But the point here is intelligence gathering, satellites, UAVs, etc. You can immediately spot where there's any concentrations of any forces. And once you know where those concentrations are, then you can attack them by missile precision missiles attack. So it's difficult to assemble any personnel. Then, but say you can keep them dispersed in a manner like a platoon size 30 men, spaced out at 300 meters. So hitting one precision missile will kill a platoon, but not the whole flipping company. And those missiles are expensive, so they're not going to waste it on that type of basing. Then you have to progress, and then you have to march forward. And if you march forward, you have to go over open fields. Now, what the Ukrainians have done is they haven't identified where the minefields are. Now, come on, you had all this time to determine and observe the Russians what they were doing when they set up the defensive lines. You could have observed them. If you didn't know where they were, you had special forces. In South Africa, we had Rekkies, reconnaissance group. Those guys moved one individually task, or two at a time, or maybe four maximum. And these guys had specific tasks. They will go in and observe. They have excellent camouflage capabilities. And these guys would have gone in and they would have made the reconnaissance on where the minefields were so you can avoid them. But apparently the Ukrainians didn't do it. Now, the Ukrainians don't have air superiorities. They have a little bit of air defenses, but not the big guns. They have maybe shoulder-launched ones on the border. But I would have withdrawn those things and put it into the counteroffensive and provide air cover for my advancing troops. But again, somebody decided, no, I don't know. This was against policy or whatever. Any case, so now you see some UAV, the famous first German Leopard kill. And you see these armored vehicles going down the road. About, say, 10 vehicles of them. And is this now supposed to be a frontal attack on the Russian defensive? Is that now supposed to be a counteroffensive? And they're driving down this road next to a line of bushes or trees and so on. And then they cross an opening. And then they suddenly drive into a field, and that's a minefield, and they all blow up. Boof. German tank, gone. Oh my God, how can a German Panzer tank be flippin' destroyed? Well, he's a tank. What makes him so special? Recently, the first British Challenger tank was destroyed. Oh my God, that is a disgrace. That is a major, I don't know, blob on a Challenger, the British military. Come on, people. A tank is a tank. It's supposed to be destroyed. Nothing is indestructible. You hit it with a artillery round. You hit it with a kamikaze drone. You hit it with a double-head, how you call it, shaped charge missile, TOW. Come on, people. That's what you can destroy any weapon. It's not a disgrace losing a tank. It's a disgrace having a tank and not using it. That is a problem. But in any case, coming back to the whole story, so the German tank was blown up and so on, and that was not an attack. That was a flippin' disgrace of any attempt, whatever they did. They went on the road, and surely the Russians cannot mine every single field, and they just chose the wrong field, and that was mined, and there you go, boof, they're all gone. What type of counteroffensive is that? How can you call any attack by the Ukrainians on the Russians as a counteroffense? Because the only way you can do it is in mass. You cannot send a company of tanks or just infantry going forward and then going into an artillery dead zone, and they are being killed by normal artillery fire. I mean, the story goes on. Yes, I know the Westerners claimed that the Ukrainians have reached the first line of defense, the Russians, but no, they haven't. None of the Ukrainians' attack has even reached the first line of attack. So if you look at the military military operations executed by the Ukrainians, none of them have any signs of resemblance to a counteroffensive. And it cannot even be done, because why? Well, the West expects miracles from 54 tanks. What? You expect penetration of any defensive lines by using 54 tanks. The Russian will take out those 54 tanks coming over the horizon in open field by precision artillery rounds, then by kamikaze, then by precision artillery rounds, and then by man-portable powered and anti-tank and tank weapons and so on, before they are even 10 kilometers into the dead zone. You need hundreds of these things. Hundreds. And don't talk to me about what that combined, how do they call it always? Combined moving of troops and combined warfare, and as if that is something new. No, it's not something new. It's logical. You have aircraft, you attack with aircraft. That combined with your missile rounds and your artillery and your armor and those are all. Why did nobody of the Ukrainians ever, infantry, go into or advance under night cover? Why? Yes, there is infrared sensors. Yes, there is infrared pickups. But have you ever seen an infrared picture? It's all blobbly. Compare that to a visual daylight view where you see detail. Night vision doesn't go that far. And if you want to use infrared, you have to have special equipment that has to be cooled to very, very low temperatures. And those are not readily available by any and all platoons. So at least you would have had, and then you make the group small enough and disperse them enough so the artillery attack or whatever is not worth it, is not effective. But then you have your infantry in range of fighting the Russian infantry. And you can even bring hardware into it, like armor. Silently in the night, you bring in your artillery, and so they become in the range of the Russian first line of defense. Doesn't that make a lot more sense? But even with that type of approach, you know what the Chechens did in the Chechen wars? They ran the distance, or they approached the dead zone, the artillery zone. They breached that during the night and ran very fast to get out of the lower limit of artillery rounds. So what that actually means is that, you know, an artillery piece has a maximum range and a minimum range. You cannot fire below that minimum range. So if you are nearer than 2 kilometers, that 152 D30 whatever cannot fire it. So you have to use 120 mortars. But they also have a limit. And what the Chechens did is they approached the front lines faster so they couldn't be fired on. And then it was like, I wouldn't say hand to hand, but it was one Russian soldier versus a Chechen soldier with a rifle. That is how it was done by them. Do you see anything like that happening on the by the Ukrainians? No. I mean, it's like if you look at the articles and so on, you read that the Ukrainians are complaining that the American tactics don't work. And then they're ignoring it. And then they are doing their own thing. Well, the doctrines of the Americans and the NATO is based on air superiority. If you don't have air superiority, then you cannot attack. And unfortunately, everything is built by NATO on that doctrine of air superiority. You know, when I watched the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, especially the second one, I asked myself, but why is Saddam Hussein not retaliating? Why are there no counter batteries, counter attacks, counter anything? Nothing was happening. And then later on realized is that America destroyed all the air defense systems and they had total air superiority. And they could at leisure destroy every single tank from the air. They actually adapted their aircraft for that type of purpose. Put them in infrared center because these tanks were like glowing embers in the desert. And then I realized you cannot fight a war if you cannot defend your assets, if you cannot protect your assets, which means if you cannot protect your tanks, if you cannot protect your infantry, if the enemy can launch aircrafts and attack them by air, that's it. You can't fire back. It's typical logic. You might as well give up. And Ukraine has no proper air defense systems. So every asset that they have is... And the war has changed also, the type of war. In the old days you had armor and infantry and artillery. And you fought the battles at a specific contact line. But now you have missiles and UAVs. And they go far beyond any contact line. And with the Russians that can fire a missile 2,000 kilometers away and destroy something there, then what the hell can you protect? Nothing. Unless you have air defenses. But you don't have it. So, I don't know what Colonel McGregor is talking about, or what's his name, or all the other guys. It's always the same thing. Ukraine has lost the war, war is over, and so forth, and the Western people are saying, no, Ukraine is winning, and oh shit, no, they have lost some Challenger tanks, and no, we have to now negotiate. God, people, listen to who is talking. Process that information from who it comes. There is not going to be a soon peace. There's nothing happening on the contact line. Not really. Until the Russians decide they're going to make an offense, a big offense. The big question is, will they still be doing it? I don't know. It doesn't look like it. Are the Russians going to settle with the boundaries that they have and wait for negotiations? Well, that would be a sad day. Because Russia would have achieved by that time nothing. Doesn't matter how good their negotiating teams will be. I mean, we had the Minsk agreements, and they lied, and they acknowledged it. So, no, there is only one option. Russia has to advance to Kiev and the Dnieper River. They have to take South Ukraine. And they have to leave Ukraine as a small, insignificant state. That's the only type of end result that the Russians can and must pursue. If they don't do it, then everything was wasted. Everything. Will NATO still support Ukraine? Yes, they will support them. Forget about Donald Trump or whoever is going to be the new president. You know, Obama wanted to close Guantanamo Bay. That didn't happen. He wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan. Nope, they escalated. Trump wanted to do the same. Nope, didn't happen. Still there after 4 years in Afghanistan. The presidents in America don't have the ultimate power. And that's what's make it so dangerous. Because you don't know really with who you are dealing with. And just remember, both parties always voted for the arms supply to Ukraine. And when, say Donald Trump, or whoever comes in, he will be briefed and told them, listen here, you cannot withdraw out of Ukraine. It is existential. As America now withdraws support, then we will lose the support of all our friends in the rest of the world, because we have shown that we are weak and we cannot protect our friends. And that's it. The end of America. So no new president will be able to make peace. Nobody. And that Biden will now concentrate more on his campaign. No, he's not even going to run. Come on, people. By the end of next year, it's a full-blown dementia case. I don't know. And I just hear the same stories over and over and over again. And it's all like either little pieces or it is totally out of the context of the bigger picture. Ukraine still have men to call up. You don't need a fully trained person to operate a tank. If you can drive it, you can drive it. If you can shoot a cannon, you can shoot the cannon. Just remember that the one guy that was doing the P-2000, whatever, German, the Ukrainian guy said, oh, these cannons are fantastic. In the old days, they had to do everything manual. Here, you just type in a coordinates and press a button. Poof! Now think about how's a modern tank with modern not viewfinders, but targeting systems, or infrared, or rangefinders. It's a much easier than any of the old T-72s or T-62s, which Ukrainian had a lot of them. Come on, these people are jumping from an old bicycle into a Rolls Royce or a BMW with all the gadgets and so on. And people are not dumb. They know how to operate stuff and learn quickly. And even if they learn quickly, they get into the battlefield and the tank is destroyed and all your training, the so-called training, is destroyed. So you take these Ukrainian pilots and you put them up into training for a year, whatever, and then they come back and they get a F-16 and then they fly onto the ringers, and then here comes a S-300 or S-400 and pops. Years training down the drain. Achieve nothing. Ukrainian pilots don't need to know everything about the aircraft. They know how to evade oncoming missiles. They know how to evade Russian fighter aircraft if they can do it with the F-16, whatever. They know that. They know that they need to know how to target certain ground things. That is what they need. They're going to need how to flow low. They're going to need the limits of the aircraft. What can it do? What's the limits of the capability? Push the limits and then understand what has been done. But all this other crap, oh my God. In any case, nothing was expected of a counter-offensive. Nothing happened. Big hoo-ha, but it kept the newsreels going. So, but I'm not a news, we are not a news channel. So, that's it for today then. So until next time, cheers.